All right, we are doing contracts. We're in week 3 and we are looking at considerations. So if you remember the 3 elements of a contract discussed in week 1, I don't know if I can find it here, but it's basically an offer, an acceptance, and consideration. Now consideration, I think my lecturer just did a really bad job of explaining it. Like it took me forever to get my head around it. So hopefully in this video I can explain it really simply. So the number one thing to remember is that consideration is anything of value that you are giving to someone else, right? So in exchange for a promise. So anything that I have that is of value, if I've got this pen here, and I say, I'll give you this pen if you promise me to whatever, then that is consideration. My giving of the pen is consideration. Normally it goes from the acceptor or the offeree, I just use acceptor because it sits better in my brain, to the offerer in reliance upon the offer. So, you make an offer to somebody this trusty roll of tape, and then I say, okay, I will give you this for the promise that you will give me that roll of tape, in reliance upon the offer of you giving me the tape. So the offer is consideration. I don't know if this was ever expressly said, or maybe I made it up. Is seen in the offer. So your offer to give me the tape in exchange for something is you giving something of value for the promise that I'll give you money. No, that's not true actually, autocorrect, thank you very much. So Khalil versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Co. If you remember this one, we looked at it, I think in week 1. The Carbolic Smoke Ball Company, they put up a public notice saying, hey, try our smoke balls. If you're sick, use it 3 times a day for 2 weeks, and then if you're still sick, then you can get a £100 reward from us. And then Khalil did this. She bought smoke balls, tried them 3 days a week, 3 times a day for 2 weeks. And then was still sick, and so she said, all right, give me more money. And they were like, no, this is puffery. Regardless of whether it's puffery or not, that's invitation to treat. We looked at it in week 1. But Khalil's failure to get better, seeing as though it was a negative detriment to herself, which is something of value, legally speaking, counts as consideration. Negative effects can be considered consideration. This might be a crude example. I would never suggest doing this, but if I say, okay, I'm going to grab a butcher's knife and I will, cut my hand off in the promise that you will give me $1 billion trillion. Maybe $1 billion trillion is not that bad of a deal, but let's say we did that. Then that's me doing something of value, which is losing something of value. Let's say in exchange for a promise that you'll do something for me. Generally consideration must move from the offerer to the acceptor. Yes, that's the offer. But then from the acceptor or the offeree back to the offerer, though it doesn't need to go to the offerer directly. So if you've offered to sell me your car for $10,000, my consideration is giving you the $10,000 in exchange for the car. And I can do that, let's say, by putting it into an envelope, giving it to my sister, and then my sister gives it to you and says, hey, here is his money, he wants the car. That's considered good consideration. The Dunlop Pneumatic Tyre Company versus Selfridge. This is a case that where this didn't happen, where consideration was not given to the relevant party. So Dunlop sells tyres. I think they're still in business. I think they're still selling tyres. They sold their stock to Dew, and they said, Dew, you can have it on the proviso that you don't sell it for less than, let's say, $100 a tyre. Right, so Dew said, okay. And then Dew then sold the tyres to a retailer called Selfridge. Selfridge then put the tyres on the shelf and listed them for less than $100 in the example. I'm making up the details, but that's the gist of it. Selfridge basically undercutted Dunlop's deal to Dew. And so Dunlop tried to sue them, say, hey guys, that's not the deal, that's not what we promised to Dew, and so therefore you can't use it. The court said, no Dunlop, that doesn't work, because you didn't promise to give anything to Selfridge. So therefore, because you didn't give consideration, there is no contract between you and Selfridge, there is only a contract between you and Dew. So because Dunlop didn't give anything of value, Selfridge did not have to, there was no contract in place. The joint offeree rule. So if I treat 2 people as one party, then either party can accept, either or both can accept, and either or both can enforce. So if I've got Barry and Jim, and I say, gang, I will sell this roll of tape to both of you for $10. Barry can pay me, and then if I don't give the roll of tape, then Jim can say, hey, give us the roll of tape. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So deeds. Deeds are really, really, really formal contracts. And they're determined so because the law says so, right? Like a deed has to be regulated by statute. They don't need consideration, as generally their formality and solemnity is considered good enough consideration. Deeds have certain requirements. They must be in writing. They must be, presented before a witness. I think about things like marriages, right? So, like, from what I know about marriages, the man and the woman both, they're declared in front of everyone, obviously, but then from a legal perspective, they have to go and sit down with a lawyer and say, hey, we want to sign the documents and become one. And so because it's so formal, because it's so legit and all that kind of stuff, consideration isn't needed. That being said, deeds are normally unilateral, so if remember, it's one party's offer to just the world. And gratuitous, which means that they are doing it in exchange for nothing. And or gratuitous. It's probably worth noting. So, for example, if I sign a deed saying that I will never litter ever again, and it's signed, legal requirements met, all that kind of stuff, then I'm bound to be doing it. There's a certain type of contract. I can't remember exactly what it is. A certain type of deed, where, if you and I are in a contract and you don't hold up your end, I can sign the deed and then excuse you of your behaviour, or of your lack of holding up your end of the bargain. And if I sign that, then then you don't have to give consideration because you're benefiting. Past consideration. So if I've given you something, if I already gave you something of value last week, I can't use that thing that I've given you as consideration for a contract that we're making now. So for example, we looked at this example in our tutorials. I forget the names, we'll say Gloria. Gloria is running a political campaign. And Dave says, all right, Gloria, I'm really good at flying planes. I've got a plane sitting around. I will do some skywriting in the sky for your event. So Gloria says, okay. And then Dave just does it out of the goodness of his own heart. He finishes and he realizes, dang it, that cost a lot more than I thought it would. And so Gloria goes, no worries, mate, I will pay it back. And then Gloria doesn't pay it back. Then Dave doesn't really have a ground to enforce that because his consideration was so long ago. Unless there's this thing called the Power On test, which is unless the consideration has three requirements. The first is that the person who gave the thing of value was asked to give the thing of value. So unless Gloria asked Dave to fly the plane, that's condition one. Condition two is that we both expect that they'll get paid. So both Gloria and Dave are expecting that Dave will get paid. And number three, such a term would have always formed a contract. So, for example, you're not asking him to do anything illegal. So if these two requirements aren't met, then past consideration is no good. I think past consideration is kind of a useless concept because the way I see it, if you've got option two filled out, like if we both expect, like if Dave and Gloria both expected that Dave will get paid, then I think that payment should be an implied term of the contract that they made, instead of not having a contract and then trying to make a new one now. I hope that makes sense. So it was an implied term back when last week when he flew the plane, and that was a contract over there, as opposed to trying to make a contract now and using that over here, which is what past consideration seems to think it is. That's just my 2 cents though. Again, I'm not a judge, so I can't change that. The standard of consideration is that it must be sufficient, not necessarily adequate. This is the peppercorn principle. Peppercorns are really small and they're not worth much, but they do have value. And you can trade, legally speaking, under this principle, you can trade a peppercorn for a billion, million, trillion dollars, because a peppercorn is of value. Chappelle v. Nestle is the precedent there. Yeah, so it doesn't matter what the market value is. If you offer me $1 to buy your car, even if the car's worth $100,000, I can pay you $1, and that can be good consideration from both of us. A pre-existing duty is not good consideration because a pre-existing duty is not valuable to someone else. So public duties. So if if, in the case of Collins v. Godfrey, I think Collins was authored to subpoena some documents. Subpoena is where you, it sounds so close to being a dirty word, but it's basically where you have to give some documents to the courts. Collins was subpoenaed by Godfrey, and then Godfrey said, I'll tell you what, if you do this, then I'll pay some money. So Collins did it, Godfrey didn't pay, and Collins was like, whoa, he owes me some money, and the courts were like, whoa, no he doesn't, you had to do that anyway. Yeah, it's the same with if I was to say my trusty roll of tape, and then I say, okay, you know, you can buy this off me for $10, and then I say after that, oh, actually, now that you've bought it, you have to give me $15. Well, that's not the case because never mind, the analogy doesn't make sense. Ignore what I just said. Hopefully the Collins v. Godfrey analogy made enough sense as it is. Exceeding the duty can be consideration though. So let's say this was the case here. Seeing as I don't remember what it is, we'll go Collins v. Godfrey. If Godfrey says, get it to, you know, you live, you know, the courts require it has to be there within 3 days, but if you get it to them within the next hour, then I'll pay you $50. Right? If Collins then, you know, got in his car, booked it to the court and subpoenaed the documents, then that would be legally enforceable because he exceeded his duty. Yeah, so this is going to happen, let's say, if you ask the police to give you extra protection. Obviously, the police have a duty to protect you just because they're the police. But if you ask them for extra protection, then they can use that to demand that you pay them more, let's say. The existing duty rule applies in both public duties and contractual duties. That's right. So public duties, yeah, police duties, contractual duties. We can see this. Yeah. So the practical benefit exception is probably a good way of looking at the pre-existing duty and how it doesn't work. So a contract can be varied if there's a practical benefit for doing so. Practical benefits can include avoiding late fees, gaining commercial advantage, etc. So what this means is, let's say I'm a wholesaler. I wholesale chairs to retail companies. You make chairs, so I want to buy chairs off you. The retail companies have said, sorry, I've made a deal with you saying, hey, you've got 10 days to complete 10 chairs. The retail companies have gotten on my back and say, hey man, we need the chairs within 5 days, right? I can, because my practical benefit is something of value that you would be giving me, I can therefore say, okay guys, if you finish in 5 days or in 4 days, then I'll pay you, you know, $10 extra. Yeah, so because you're giving me something of value, which is making sure I don't avoid late fees, then I can give you some more, and therefore you're giving me good consideration. Yeah, so a practical benefit can be if it looks like you're going to breach my contract, right? If it looks like, let's use the chair analogy again. If it looks like you're going to finish the chairs in 15 days instead of 10, then I can say, okay guys, I'll pay you an extra $10 to make sure that you get the job done on time. And that would be seen as a practical benefit, which counts as consideration from your end, because that's the thing of value that you're giving me. And yeah, forbearance to sue, which is giving up my suing rights, can be seen to be good consideration as well, because that is something that you would see to be valuable. So if you smash my car, then I can say, I'll tell you what, you fix my car and I promise not to sue you, right? So my thing of value that you have is fixing my car. Your thing of value that I have is the ability to not sue. Partially paying off a debt isn't good consideration either. So remember, consideration is anything of value. So if you owe me $100 and you say, hey Elijah, I will pay $20 for that $100, and I will treat that as consideration for this roll of tape, which is my thing of value I'm giving to you. That's not good, because that $20 that you've given me is not valuable because you are in debt to me. Yeah, especially if it's traded for forbearance. So if you say, Elijah, I've kind of got the example here. If you owe me $100 and then you say, okay, Elijah, I'll pay you $70 now, but then you can't sue me for the rest of that $30. That doesn't really work, because now you're asking me to give you something of value, which is not suing you, but you're not really giving me anything of value, since you haven't even paid off the debt that you owe me. unless there's fresh consideration. So unless, just trying to think of an example here, under that analogy, unless you say, okay, Elijah, I'll pay $70 and I will give you a box of favorites, and then you don't sue me. Well, the box of favorites changes the equation. That's then that's fresh consideration, and then I can decide whether to accept those terms or not. Sort of like a new contract under the contract that they've already got. So that's domestic law. International law is really easy, thank goodness. Consideration is not needed. Instead, we looked at an intention to be bound, which is what both parties have to do. Like the offerer has to make a statement which has intention to be bound, and the acceptor accepts it with the intention to be bound as well. So there needs to be a higher level of intention to be bound. I don't really know what that means. That's just a sentence that we learned, and so I wrote it down. Article 29 of the CISG. Let's just remember what that is. Okay, so I started drafting up the CISG, all of it here. The idea is I can condense it, take it into class, take it into exam periods because we can take in notes, and then it's all just there. CISG, the Civil, the 1980 UN Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods. There we go, I was a bit off. Article 29 says that variations occur when both parties agree to it. So if we've agreed, so variation, change of contract. If we agree, if you're in America and I'm here in Australia and I say, okay, I'll sell this thing to you for $10. And then you say, okay, and then before we send anything, I call you up and say, hey, actually, we'll do it for 12, and you say, okay, then we vary the contract, and seeing as though we don't need consideration, it's just instantly valid. Yeah, thank you for listening.